Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the panel discussion for the amazing film that you just watched, 25 Prospect Street. My name's Greg Liakos, and I'll be moderating this afternoon's panel discussion. A wide range of individuals that supports artists with disabilities in Brookline Village, Mass. Rich discussion about this extraordinary film and the story that it tells. I'll give you a little bit about each of the panelists. First, I'd like to introduce Munchie and K-Mann from the process. Just a little bit of additional background. K-Mann is an ambassador of the Prospector Theater and has become an integral part of the Prospector's success in its community outreach, with an internationally recognized model of competitive and integrated employment. And I'll also add that they're both really good dancers, as you saw from school and family engagement at the Massachusetts Rehabilitation Commission. Manel, 13 years of experience and knowledge working and partnering with individuals with disabilities and their families. Next, joining us, Gentry. Jeff currently serves as the Disability Services Director at JVS Boston, where he leads career coaches who focus on connecting transition age youth with disabilities to paid employment and equipping adults with disabilities to grow their careers. And finally, we have Eric Schaeffer, the diversity, retain, and advance the careers of team members of diverse backgrounds. Thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And I'm so grateful that each of you can bring your perspectives to this conversation. So I'd like to start off with a question for Munchie. Munchie, the film represents a snapshot in the history of the Prospector Theater. Can you speak to what you have learned and/or how your thinking about employment for people with disabilities has evolved since the start of the theater and/or since the completion of the film?
Absolutely. 25 Prospect Street is a very raw, intimate, and honest portrayal of our startup, right? First year of operation, you see us learning, trying new things, failing, succeeding, doing what it takes to actually run the business. And in the course of the film, you see us explore both roles in the traditional theater setting and then outside of it. I guess one of the initial early assumptions that we had in starting the Prospector was that this would really be a place of transition. It would be almost like a vocational training school, and prospects we would transition or graduate on to roles in the community elsewhere. Other businesses would take note of the work that we're doing, recognize the value of our sparkle, and find employment opportunities for us. And that didn't really happen within the first few years of operating. And when the phone calls weren't coming from other employers, we took it upon ourselves to create more and more jobs, because on average still we receive about 4 job applications per week. There are far more people looking for a job than jobs we're able to provide, but we're doing everything we can to create as many jobs as possible. Recently, we're starting to see signs of change amongst employers. A lot more steam behind diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion initiatives. And for those reasons, we are getting more phone calls asking about how to include adults with disabilities in the workforce, how to make things universally designed, how to be more accessible, how to find talented workers that are going to add value to the business. We're starting to see those shifts happen. It's been a long journey. We're excited that it's starting, but that would probably be one of the big, I guess, revelations throughout my 9 years here, is that maybe the world now is ready for more places like the Prospector.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and for K-Mann, your story, I think reinforces what Munchie was just saying, because you I think tell that story about your journey through work and the different experiences you've had and the confidence that you've developed as an employee and as a leader in the theater and in your community. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing now for work and some of the life lessons and employment lessons that you learned from your time at the Prospector Theater.
Oh, I had my first job was in Bethel, but that was just a job that I was not fond with. But when I worked at Stop and Shop, pushing the shopping carts, I liked it, but I thought like, wait a minute, I think the Prospector needed someone like me.
Yes, we did.
Yes.
We absolutely did.
Yes. And then after a while, I got another job at Planet Pizza, but I realized that was more ordering online, doing it on the register. And I also did that here at the Prospector. I mean, I trained somebody at Planet Pizza. I also train people in box office too. And another job.
Yeah.
And also service learning. That most of the schools that do come here learning about our mission of the Prospector, and we give them a full tour of the building itself. Here. It's fun.
Nice.
Educating, yeah.
Nice. Do you still? I have to ask this. Do you still aspire to head the World Wrestling Federation?
Tell them where you were a couple weeks ago. Where did you go?
I was last Sunday at WWE Madison Square Garden.
Nice.
It was fun. I wish it was backstage, but it's okay.
All right.
He was. I heard reports, confirmed reports. And because he came into work the next day with no voice, that he was the loudest person in Madison Square Garden.
Thank you both. So maybe we'll go to Manel. So your organization, the Mass Rehab Commission, is an organization that provides a whole array of services for individuals with disabilities in Massachusetts, including programs to support successful employment. That's really central to your mission, and I know your work. Can you speak to the current landscape of employment in the Commonwealth for individuals with disabilities and how you see this evolving regionally or nationally?
Good afternoon, Greg. Good afternoon to the panel. Good afternoon to all our attendees. A big thank you to this panel for everyone that took time to join us this afternoon, and also a big thank you to Vinfen for putting this event together. I think this conversation is great. The more we have conversation like this, the better it is in advancing the employment goal that we have, or that we want to see for all individuals with disabilities. At Mass Rehab, our focus is helping individuals live life on their terms, meaning we have to understand approach to their whole life. So we are thinking and having ongoing conversation with them about their physical needs, their emotional needs, their mental support, their social support that they need. So when it comes to employment, as we know, employment has been a crisis for individuals with disabilities for decades and decades, despite the achievements of the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and also the protection under Section 504. Unemployment or employment for individuals with disabilities, there are still major barriers. And at Mass Rehab, we have a division, our VR division. We are working tirelessly, dedicated individuals, professionals, working with individuals in the community seeking employment. So we work with them on finding jobs, job retention, job preparation, and also job training. So we are dedicated in that fact, and we know that MRC alone cannot do this. So we have to partner, and we've partnered with employers. So we all have a role to play. So the individuals, families also have a role to play, and our employers also, we have to continue to work with them. As far as employment for the state and beyond, or the country as a whole, I think what we can do is I think families can play a bigger role. So instead of professionals working with working with the individuals, how can we equip families to be a bigger part of the process? Provide the tools to them, provide the training, the workshops to them, so they can also help in the process. So instead of, just Mass Rehab, but just other employment agencies working with individuals, how can we involve families in the process? And we can provide them with the tools, the training, workshops, what they need, so they can be part of it. And I think that's where a lot of families' fears can be allayed a little bit. So families have fears because sometimes they're not as involved in the process as they should be. So I think the more they are involved in the process, the less they will fear what's to come. The less they will fear the unknown. But I think we all have has a role to play. And at Mass we are really trying to lead the way for employment for all individuals with disabilities.
Thank you.
Greg, if I may too, I just want to point out,
jump in, Eric.
That relationship between places like Mass Rehab, vocational rehab clinics across the country, state agencies, local agencies, that partnership, as Manel mentioned, between those agencies and employers is just invaluable, because much like sometimes families don't know how to start their journey or don't know where the resources are, employers face that same barrier, that they don't know how to start their outreach efforts or where they can go to really find the talented individuals that places like Mass Rehab can bring to them. So I think that partnership is just absolutely vital.
Thank you. Yeah, and Jeff, I wonder to the second question that I posed to Manel, about kind of looking at the landscape and the evolution of employment for adults with disabilities. How do you see that shifting now? And what does the film tell us about our understanding of where we are in that arc, and where do we need to go next?
Thank you so much, Greg. Those are two different questions.
Right, sorry, I threw a lot at you.
I will do my best to answer that. How do I see the landscape shifting? I'm Jeff. I'm glad to be here. Love the Prospector. I've run transition programs for years. Tried to beg my transition students from Randolph and Stoughton public schools to go to the Prospector Theater for the opening of The Force Awakens. They turned me down, so now I only get to meet K-Mann and Munchie now.
Next time.
I've been trying to get to you since 2016, so it's an honor to be here. The landscape, I would say, is much more open and accommodating for people with disabilities than it was when I started in this work. You're 16 years ago in 2007. I think there's a number of reasons for that. I think part of the reason is because of the growing awareness of neurodiversity and autism. Everybody knows somebody with a disability.
Right.
I mean, if we really look at the ADA definition, to Manel pushing us back towards policy, by that definition of disability, everybody probably has multiple people in their families and neighborhoods, but people are more willing to give people an opportunity because of the hiring crisis that took place during COVID. We had a lot of employers giving not just a start opportunities for employment for young adults and more mature adults with disabilities, but also giving them reach opportunities, which was super exciting. And saying, okay, can you, not only work on the dishes at the hospital, but can you help keep PPE in stock and help provide the additional ancillary support these nurses need to do their work during this crisis season? And let me tell you, if there's one group of people that are built to thrive during a pandemic, it's the disability community. And so I feel like it's been going on 4 years of hard times for us as a country, but it's been an honor as a member of the disability community who gets to walk beside people with disabilities during that season. What does Prospector say about the arc of employment? I think what the Prospector says is we need to constantly create and iterate new potential solutions that create pathways to employment for people with disabilities. I'll look Munchie and K-Mann right in the eye and say, there's no way that's the tactic that I would take. I'm a nerdy, introverted, like bookish, Bostonian, but I think the fact that they did was brilliant, because what they did is they said, this is what we think we can do excellently to connect people with disabilities to employment. At JVS, we're at the middle of the most dynamic healthcare industry in the country in Boston. So we work primarily with hospitals around creating employment access, because that's where we are. When I think about the work that we do and the trajectory of the work that we do, one of my favorite metaphors is from a movie, Apollo 13, where the engineers are in a room and somebody brings in a box of spare parts and throws it on the table and says, we've got to use this to make this fit into this. That's the work that we get to do, whether we're MRC or Ally or Advanced Auto Parts or Prospector. And let me tell you, it's something I wake up excited every morning to get to do, and excited to talk about today.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you. So yeah, and I think in some of our preparatory conversations, I mentioned that I was struck by the moment in the film where Val looks at the three balloons, and each of the balloons represents $1 million deficit that the theater faces. And so that the theater, Munchie, K-Mann, the whole community was faced with some very, very difficult choices. And where they went to solve that problem, would I think dictate, whether the theater would continue as a successful business operation. And one of the themes that emerges in that part of the film is the reinvestment in the human capital, essentially, that is the fuel that the engine of the theater runs on. I thought that was a particularly powerful moment, and told us a lot about the model, Jeff, that you just kind of described. So maybe just ask the panelists, starting maybe with Munchie, to kind of reflect a little bit on that.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, we've probably seen 25 Prospect Street hundreds of times now. And then I have to relive all of my hairstyles. And I have the worst thing to relive. K-Mann and I both make mistakes in the film,
Yes.
right? You see us both fail. And what's worse than failing is where there's somebody with the camera in front of you while you're failing. So I relive the three balloon scene over and over and over again. And it still fills me with that same anxiety that I felt that day, and realizing it. In any other business, when approached with that type of deficit, would immediately look and say, hey, we need to look at payroll, right? Let's immediately look to payroll. And for us, it seemed counterintuitive, but we were we got to double down on payroll. We have to make great jobs, and great jobs that are going to add value to the business. And that awakening is really when we discover sparkle mining, our process of how do we take what people love to do, what they're passionate about, and transform that into a job and a profession. And in one of our conversations that we had, I think we talked about how that type of strategy of looking at your workforce and playing to their strengths and knowing what people are great at and putting them into jobs where they can do what they're great at is not just something that works for us as an organization dedicated to employing people with disabilities. That's an example of good universal design.
Right.
So I think registering and recognizing we're in a pinch here, and the only thing that's really going to get us out of it is what makes each one of us unique, what powers us, what motivates us, what is going to give me as an employee the drive to do my 100%. So you see that happen right before you in 25 Prospect Street, and actually it pays off in the end. We're able to overcome the deficit by diversifying revenue streams, creating new programs that we apply for funding to grantors for. All of the jobs that were created opened up new doors for ourselves as an organization, but for prospects as people and professionals.
Yeah, well said. And Eric, when you saw that when you first saw that segment in the film, did you see parallels with your experiences as an employer?
Oh, absolutely. I've worked for, I've been in retail for 30 years. Worked for several Fortune 500 companies, some who were, very successful and some who weren't. And everybody goes through adversity at some point, and it's how you react to that, how you respond to that is going to ultimately determine your success. And I think really, Munchie said it perfectly. You can't just cut payroll. At the end of the day, that's not a solution because you can only cut so much. You do have to innovate. You have to think of new ways to drive revenue, new ways to increase your profit margins. You can't just cut because that stream runs out pretty quick, usually at the expense of the people that you're trying to serve or entertain or interact with. So that really rang true to me, and that sparkle mining process. That when I heard them talking about that really struck a chord with me as saying, and Munch mentioned it. That is how everybody should interact with their employees. What can I do to make this employee as successful as possible? If they're not hitting a home run right where they're at right now, is there something else that they can do? Is there someone else that they can work with? Is there another way we can develop their skills?
Right.
Hiring people and turnover, that's an expensive proposition.
Yeah.
And as Jeff mentioned, especially in today's times that are out there for employers and the hiring crises that are out there, it's very, very difficult. And it just, it makes more sense as a person, as a business, to focus on the employees that you have and see how you can develop and encourage and find their sparkle.
Yeah. And I think we should also recognize that often it's not easy, right, for the employer or for the employee. I think Val uses a phrase like, the freedom to fail. And you see in the film experiences of employees, who realize themselves or with their colleagues that maybe this isn't the right role for me, but let's roll up our sleeves and try something else. And I'm wondering, K-Mann, you've been asked several times, even during the course of the film, you were asked to kind of step up, right? To look inside yourself and ask yourself what you're capable of and what you really want to do. And each time you were able to find that place in yourself that got you to that next level. Talk a little bit about that experience.
Oh, well, for me, working on the floor at box office concessions and all that kind of work, now I'm working in the kitchen, learning how to bag popcorn for 4 ounces. I never learned that before. Now I have been. And working in our projection room, I did it at one time, but now I'm learning how to put like a movie in or learning how our managers are running it. And it's a new adventure for me.
Well, K-Mann is basically saying he's never satisfied. I'm like, K-Mann is always looking for the next job and what else can I learn how to do. And when he mastered everything on the floor, it was, all right, get me into the kitchen. Okay, get me into the projection booth. And between that, the panel discussions, the 25 Prospect Street viewings, service learning, you're always ready to step up to the plate.
And of course, I do I am a rap star also too. My name is Professor K, and my rap videos are so well put down because my brother here helped me out with it.
So even rapping, new experience for K-Mann. But as you can tell, K-Mann doesn't shy away from an audience.
No.
So it was
not lack confidence. That's for sure.
No. It was a perfect opportunity, and I think like K-Mann, it goes to show that there's this massive untapped talent pool of people who want to work, who can work, and who are going to rock their jobs, who are going to show up early, stay till the job is done, give it 100% while we're there, want to learn new things, want to grow, want to better ourselves. We need more opportunities, and I'm glad that I'm joined by these other amazing panelists who are helping to create those opportunities so that millions more Americans can experience the joys that we do every day here at the Prospector.
Yeah.
Greg, if I may add to that.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, if I may add to that, and I completely understand what Mike said, that individuals with disabilities, they want to do better, they want to grow, but we have to understand that people with disabilities also face this catch-22. So in terms of payment. So if they are on
Yes.
public benefits, so if they are getting SSI, SSDI, public housing, SNAP, and so forth. So, and that's where I think we all play a role. Our legislators, the federal government, our state government, we all play a role, because you're telling individuals with disabilities, if you make that much, we're gonna take everything away from you, or we're
Yes.
gonna lessen that. So
Are-
they have to make a decision. So it's like catch-22. What do I do? Do I pursue that career? Do I pursue that job? Do I stay in that job that I really like? Because the job is not only the paycheck, it's helping me with community. I belong, I'm giving back, I'm part of the community. Or do I risk losing everything else, like my medical benefits, my housing may be in jeopardy, I
Yes.
have next needs. So that's why I think we face this catch-22. And then that's why I think state government, the federal government, there are things that they can do right now to help the disability community when it comes to employment. Instead of punishing people that want to work, that want to do better, that want to grow, let's find a way so they can keep their benefits, so they can remain independent in the community and also work, because work is not just paycheck for individuals with disabilities. It's much more than that. So we have to
Yeah,
also
thank you, Manel.
look at
That's
that catch-22.
That's-
Can
yeah,
I pull on that thread for a
please,
minute?
please, Jeff.
So Manel, you're totally right. Like poverty is a policy choice, right? And we've chosen as a country to keep people with disabilities in poverty with things like the asset limits and SSI, with taking away PCA service and Medicaid accessibility for. I have a friend I met with last week who's a healthcare consultant, who's a $250 an hour healthcare consultant if he's worth $1, and believe me, he's worth more than $1, and he has to keep his earnings under $12,000 a year because he requires PCA services. That is mind-blowing, right? Like that should not happen. At the same time, for a lot of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and autism who are on SSI, there are workforce incentives, and it's a more nuanced process of working and reporting benefits than the film shows. At some point, I think the film makes it way too simple.
Yep.
And it is not. There are natural drawdowns, and I'm not a workforce incentives counselor. I'm not a CWIC, but there are a lot of people who do that. So I would say if you're working with young adults and you're working with families, to Manel's point, who are looking at employment, they need to meet with benefits counselors early so that they get educated and really understand. Because I don't know Hope personally in the film, but my guess is the challenge we see there is one around reporting, right? And those are things that a lot of families can fall into without proper education.
Yeah.
And people who are watching, if you're involved in accompanying people into employment and supporting them or running programs that do that, if you're privileged to do the work that I get to do, then you need to be educating families and individuals up front before they get a job. To not do so, I think is malpractice, because then we run into these situations where people are making these horrible decisions. Do I work or do I just rely completely on benefits? There are lots of interim spaces in between those two choices, but fear tells us to run towards a pole, lose all our benefits or work. Like work with your supports, and also quit making policy a poverty choice in this country.
Jeff,
I just need to add in there too that's such an important point for the employer to understand too. You would never think, if you aren't familiar with the system or don't know someone who has to deal with benefits in that way, you might think you're doing somebody a favor. I've had people as a district manager, in my tenure, come to me asking, do they have to get a raise, or can we cut their hours because this month is a paper, they get paid 3 times this month instead of 2. And those are things that if you're, as an employer, you just need to be aware of and make sure that, you hit it on the head. Get people in touch with their benefits counselors, because there are some solutions in some cases that can really be helpful, and that the system can be difficult to navigate, both as a as a family member, as an employee, as an employer. But those benefits counselors can be absolute lifesavers to help people find some balance. Living within the system that we have now, it can help maximize, but certainly we have some opportunities to do better.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Eric. Thank you.
Eric, picking up on that, there was one other notion that we wanted to discuss, and especially through your perspective as a private sector employer. There's sometimes an assumption that employing persons with disabilities means compromising your business model, or delivering charity, if you will. What do you think businesses need to know about the value of an inclusive workplace?
Yeah, that is a great point, and I kind of call that the FUD factor. It's fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Is what's going through if you haven't started an inclusive policy of employment, or not actively pursuing candidates with disabilities for your job openings. You may have those fears. You may think that be fearful of lawsuits, or that you're going to have to make these sweeping changes to the way you do business. And what we found is that in most cases, any accommodations that you might need to provide to an employee are so modest. There are things that other employees might even see them and say, like, man, I could really benefit from that.
Yes.
Things as simple as some flexibility in a schedule, or permitting the hiring of 2 part-time employees instead of 1 full-time employee, giving somebody a stool at a cash register where they might be able to sit down for a few minutes while they're interacting. These are all things that you would do for an employee who just got off of surgery or got back from maternity anyways. So I think that's one thing that I would put out there, is so often the accommodations that I think that's a big piece that people worry about, is that these accommodations are going to be extreme and expensive, and by and large that's just not the case.
And if anybody ever had any questions about, like, oh, well, what kind of accommodations, I'm not ready, I don't know, I would ask them if they've ever used a ramp, right? Because let's talk just about universal design, right? Some of us are stair users, not all of us are stair users, but we can all use the ramp, right? If we build things universally designed, where it benefits everybody, allows everybody to participate, it's going to benefit all, right? That's not a solution for the disability community. That is a solution for the workforce in general. Even something like text messaging, which was started as an accessibility service, is now something that we use, all of us, each and every day. So those universal solutions, whether it be a stool, an ergonomic mat, a flexible schedule, those are great things to add to your workforce, regardless of whatever your mission or your goals are.
Yes. Well put.
Can I hypothesize from an employer's perspective, Eric, and you can tell me if I'm full of crap?
Sure.
So many people with disabilities are in the population, and so many working professionals in the country are parents or family members of people with disabilities. I've always suspected that there is a great cultural value in employers highlighting and really targeting employing people with disabilities, because undoubtedly you're affirming employees who have people in their family network and their neighborhood network that they care and they're looking for a trajectory. So I would have to think that there's kind of an unexpected kind of cultural boost that comes out of inclusion. That yes, it benefits the candidate with a disability, but it also benefits the network of employees who have a personal connection.
Absolutely.
Is that true, or am I just making up stories?
No, you're absolutely right, and that those benefits really do apply to everybody. You find benefits, as we were just talking about. When you make some modest accommodations or changes to the way you do things, that benefits every employee. Everybody can use that ramp. But from just from a business standpoint as well, as you bring people of diverse backgrounds into your organizations, they bring a different thought process with them. You can think about challenges that people with different types of disabilities have gone through with their lives, and the creative solutions in many cases that they've had to come up with, the life hacks or the workarounds. That brings, I think that's where some of that hard work and that work ethic comes from. Is many people have had to, they've had to pave their own way their whole lives. They'd have to think about ways to overcome obstacles without somebody handing them the tools every day.
Yeah, those
that shows in their work ethic, that shows in their productivity, that shows in in their tenure and turnover numbers. So you're absolutely right. Absolutely.
Those life experiences that they bring to the work are absolutely invaluable. And so excellent. Thank you so much, everybody. This is a great conversation. So, go ahead, Manel.
If I can quickly add to that,
Yes,
and also to thank Eric for being here as an employer. It just shows that he's an ally and he's willing to understand, he's willing to be part of the conversation. And I think that's what we also need to do. Instead of trying to criticize employers, let's bring them to the table. Let's have a conversation. Let's inform them. Let's educate them. They don't know what they don't know, but employers like Eric being willing to be part of the conversation can only move this conversation forward. So that's why I thank Eric for being here. At the same time, we understand that we have to inform employers about the different abilities that individuals have, their competence, their brilliance, their intelligence. So, and also employers, they are in business, for profit. So they have to see their benefits in this as well. So it's up to us to inform them how it would benefit them to be more inclusive, how their companies will be more inclusive, one, and it will strengthen their culture, and then also it will increase productivity across the board. So they have to see what's in it for them. At the same time, instead of criticize, let's try to bring them to the table, inform and educate, because we all have a role to play in this.
Yeah. Well said. So I want to take some audience questions now for the next phase of our work. Sorry, Munchie.
I could talk forever. So I need my mute button
we'll definitely rely on you for some of these answers. So I'll start for the full panel. What should an individual with a disability and or the family of that person with a disability do to start the process of employment? So a very practical question. Maybe Manel, that's a very practical question for you that you can share with families.
What is the question is what should they do?
Yeah, to start the process. So you've got a family member with a disability who wants to be employed. Where do they go first?
Well, they can come to us at Mass Rehab. So,
okay.
So we provide this sort of wrap around services, as Jeff was talking about. Seeing a benefits counselor, we can do that at Mass Rehab. So we can do job, like I said, we assist with finding a job retention, job exploration, job training. And also we fund a program starting at the age of 14. So if you have a young adult, a loved one in high school, so they can start our pre-employment transition services program. So there they can learn about they can have hands-on experience through volunteering, through internship, through externship. So they can start the process if there's a desire to work after leaving the school system, after turning 22 or after graduation. So the process can start at the age of 14, and that can be done through our pre-employment transition program at Mass Rehab that we fund. There's a vendor assigned to every school in Massachusetts, so that if there's a desire for work, so it can start there. And also, we also contract with independent living centers, where if the student is not yet in high school, they can start the conversation with an independent living center, like what to expect if the idea or the goal, the desire is to work, it's employment after high school. So I think, like I said, it's all connected, it's all work hand in hand, and MRC is leading the way because, like I said, we contract with our independent living centers Those centers are cross age, cross disabilities, so they work with any age, any disability. But when you have a student that starts high school, and they can start our pre-employment program at the age of 14, and there are other programs around in the community, like we have Easter Seals, we have Partners for Youth with Disabilities. They have ongoing monthly support for individuals who wants to work, who wants to learn more about their disability rights. So there are so many programs and services out there, but I think the process can start, if employment is a goal, it can start with our pre-employment program that we provide at Mass Rehab.
Thank you. Thank you. That's right. And you know, for other states, you know, I think Connecticut has similar kinds of state programs, right? Jeff, you probably deal with a lot.
Yeah, that's a federal pre-employment's a federal program, so it should be in every state.
Okay, thank you. All right, so the next
can I just
please
tag
go
on
ahead.
to Manel? Munchie and I are the overtalkers, so we'll be in the overtalkers corner. I just want to really reaffirm what he said, like as far as starting early. And I would say the better question in my mind is not what should they do to start, but when. And when is early. And the biggest data-driven indicator of people with disabilities working in their 20s and throughout their adult lives is early access to paid work before high school, paid work before exiting high school, not just internships, and parental expectations of work. Those two things you can start even before age 14. But, you know, the answer is start early. My kids talk about what they want to do when they grow up. They don't have substantial disabilities. They should be no different than somebody with Down syndrome or somebody with autism. It's not different. My son went to work at Market Basket bagging groceries, K-Mann, and pushing carriages when he was 14. The problem with people with disabilities is not that grocery stores are the common kind of like road employer people think about. The problem is we're not getting our young adults with disabilities into Market Basket or Stop and Shop at 14, 15, 16 with their same age peers. So when is the real driver, I think, to the answer there.
Very, very important.
Can I just also add, because Jeff and I are now we're gonna compete for the mic here. I echo everything that both Manel and Jeff said, and then even just, you know, to latch on to Jeff's suggestion about the earlier the better. I couldn't agree more. Right, sparkle mind young, and just as Jeff said, he's working with his kids right now to learn what they want to be when they grow older. This isn't something that's unique to the disability community. I think just starting early and sparkle mining early. Whatever your loved one, son, daughter, niece, nephew, whomever in your life loves doing, figure out ways to let them do that. A lot of times we see here that prospects have been jaded by the traditional educational environment, where if I love spinning things and I'm spinning things all the time, the teacher just gets upset with me and says, stop spinning things, stop spinning things. But rather here at the Prospector, we say, okay, let's keep spinning things. And while we're spinning this stuff, we want to kind of understand, well, why do you like that? What about spinning is exciting? What do you like to do? Is it the motion? Is it the way that it looks? Right. So I think you just got to keep in tune with what your child loves to do. Keep them interested in their sparkle. Find ways for them to further their sparkle, and then start to think of the career opportunities that individual can take those transferable skills from their sparkle and apply to in a job setting.
Yeah, that's well put. So the Vinfen program that I run is called Gateway Arts, and they're visual artists with disabilities, and they make work for sale in our store when they get 50% commission, and for exhibition in our gallery and other places around. And some of our strongest relationships have been with schools with strong visual arts programs, right? And the teachers and the families and the school communities have fostered the visual arts skills in those kids. And then, you know, when they turn 22, they can really realistically envision a career in the visual arts, and they come to Gateway to advance that. So that's another another example, an affirmation of what you're all what you've all just said, which is great. So go to the next question. So how do you maybe this one, what differences, this is another audience question. Thank you to the audience for posing these questions. What differences or unique challenges have you seen in supporting individuals with mental health challenges versus intellectual and developmental disabilities in getting employment? They're in some ways, two different types of obstacles for some people to employment or to employers. But of course, a lot of similar experiences. So is that something that any of you can address?
I'll weigh in real quick on that one, because I think that kind of speaks to some of those invisible disabilities that are out there, and it's easier for people to sometimes comprehend and deal with a visible disability because they might be able to understand it a little bit better or think about how they might compartmentalize it. But I think your overall strategy is very similar, where when you're interviewing somebody, when someone gets promoted, when they start, when they have a new manager, make sure that they understand the work that's expected and ask, are there any accommodations that they might need to be successful? Something as simple as having a quiet space where somebody can go for a few minutes. Again, that can benefit so many different people. And again, it's a very low or no cost accommodation in most cases. But whether it's due to stigma or past experience or embarrassment, sometimes people don't want to volunteer that information. And I think if you have an employer, as an employer, if you're asking that question up front, that can be very meaningful. I was actually at a conference where one employer was talking about how they included someone's accommodation request right in their job offer. I mean, imagine being a new employee and you can see that employer accepting you in writing before you've even started there, knowing specifically what you're going to need to be successful, acknowledging that. And I thought, wow, what a great best practice that was.
And what I would add to that is it's hard to provide a blanket answer to that because everyone is so different. Like even if you have similar disabilities, your strength, your abilities, your skill sets, it's all different. So I think that's where it comes with the person-centered approach, the individualized approach, and it's all had to do in collaboration. So I think to sort of try to answer that question, I think whatever agency or whoever you're working with toward employment goals, I think everything will come out during sort of the person-centered plan. Like what kind of support would you need? What works best for you? What are your strengths? What are your abilities? Where do you need help the most? What works? So like it's sort of understand the person and meeting them where they're at.
Yeah, thank you. Go ahead, Jeff.
Rapid fire response to this. So a couple things. One is the underfunding of employment services for people with mental health in the Commonwealth is despicable and needs to change, right? We invest a lot in people with IDD and autism. We need to do the same for the mental health community. Two, I have some colleagues at MRC that introduced me to a program that they're initiating called Count Me In, where they're encouraging fellow counselors and other MRC members to identify their own disabilities, many of which are mental health related, so that they can have a disclosure positive approach to disability. I think that's brilliant. That's something that we've been pushing at JVS. I'm a person with ADHD and clinical depression. I talk about it a lot, right? Because I want people to feel comfortable with their disability. Three is if you have a partner employer that you trust and you have a candidate who trusts that employer, it is often smart to talk in clear, real terms about how that mental health disability can evidence in their work. I have an MRC client in the last couple of years who's had a lot of success, but if you just looked at the back of his baseball card and the way his disability evidences itself, and sometimes the self-talk that he has, I think employers would rightfully be very concerned. He is a safe individual, educated individual, a very successful individual. But with his permission and partnership, from the very beginning, we talked to human resources and his manager about how his disability evidence is. And
Right.
he's had a lot of success, right?
Right.
But that's because we saw that wall coming and we started talking about it. And in the case, I just wanted to throw into Eric's point, like, as disability employment professionals, I'm sure there are a lot in this room. What I found in my career is employers are rarely the problem.
Yeah.
Like, employers are usually more than willing to work with you. We need to own the responsibility. If we take dollars to support people with disabilities as coaches and workforce professionals, then we need to take responsibility to think creatively about how we partner with employers. But the number of times employers have turned me down carte blanche in 16 years, I can count them on two hands.
Wow, that's really interesting, Jeff. Thank you. And thank you for sharing that about yourself too. I mean, I think that's really important. And reminding us, of the range of abilities, that we all have. And it's not static, it's always shifting. Some are more visible than others, and we need to be attuned to those. And I think when in this part of the discussion, I think about the Rachel's experience at the Prospector, and the notion that is Rachel ready for the public interactions that she's going to have to manage every day, and how the theater and its management thought about that, how her family, her mom thought about that. That was I thought another very, very powerful moment in the film. And when we think about Rachel's experiences in this context, Munchie, how do you think about it?
Well, I think like we all see it. Rachel has a style of communication that's different than my own, and you actually see
Right.
Rachel and I at certain points we have tension in the way that we're unable to communicate with one another. And to be quite frank, it took me some time to learn the best ways to communicate with Rachel. And I kept trying to think that like I needed Rachel to fit my style of communication. And it wasn't until I started to try to communicate in Rachel's style of communication that I made those breakthroughs. And we want our audiences and our guests to come in and to have those same experiences. We want those moments of tension. We want those moments where, under pressure, that's how you make diamonds, right? So, and what we thought originally is that we would need to be very vigilant in policing that, and to make sure that the public was aware of what's going on, and so that they wouldn't have walked away being like, well, why was that person talk to me like that? But what we actually found was that by really emphasizing building a culture as part of the business, and by having like the idea of sparkle and being a prospect and putting ourselves into the community, being out, being seen, being heard, what ended up happening was that we never had to police those situations. The rare times when they did occur, it was our guests who were policing the other guests, right?
Mm.
We never needed to step in. It was other guests who would say, this is what's going on here. This is what's happening. And aren't you so lucky to be a part of what's happening, right? And I think that's, you can apply that to any of the topics that we've discussed. When you build a culture around a business, and a culture of trust, a culture where you're inviting the public and your supporters in to be a part of it, to feel invested in, they're going to take that responsibility and they're going to hold it, and they're going to make sure that, that sparkly beacon stays lit.
Yeah, well said. Well, let me ask you, Munchie and K-Mann too, jump in here. So in some of the chat comments during the film, there was a question about this. I think part of the genesis for this question came about 25 Prospect Street in relation to the earlier films that we saw in today's Vinfen festival, which explored some very, very difficult, heart-wrenching kind of experiences, for refugees and for families of young people with some very, very significant disabilities, and the strain that it brought on them, and the financial and emotional challenges that they face. So so the question is, is this a story to some degree? Is the story of the prospector a story of privilege? Can you speak about this role, the role this type of model plays in the spectrum of employment, and is social enterprise, that phrase that you use in there for the nonprofit model, is that a possibility for all, for some? What do you think?
I don't think our model is one of privilege. I think our model is one of blood, sweat, tears, and sparkle. And over the course of the hour and a half of 25 Prospect Street, like, we worked our butts off to make the Prospector what it is today. When K-Mann and I started in June of 2014 or whatever, 9 a.m. till 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night here. Nothing was ever handed to us. Believe it or not, you can't go to Barnes and Noble and just find a guidebook, right? There's no how to create competitive integrated employment for dummies handbook. It doesn't exist. Trust us. We looked everywhere. So what we built, it took real effort, and it took a lot of trial and error, of failing, right? And at the theater, we say that to fail is your first attempt in learning, right? It is just an opportunity to learn something new. And ultimately, what I tell everybody, whoever reaches out to us to say, oh, I want to build a movie theater, or what you've done is so spectacular, how can I bring that to my community? Or why was it a movie theater? I don't know if I'd ever be able to do a movie theater. It doesn't need to be a theater, right? The ultimate Jedi mind trick, to use a movie reference that I love, is that people walk in and thinking it's a movie theater, but in reality, it's an innovation lab, a vocational training academy, a place to experiment. The model is the most important product, and you could take the model that we have and apply it to a small gift shop in downtown America that employs 5 people. You could apply it to a golf pro shop. You could apply it to a bakery or a car wash. And trust me, I've seen all of these, right? Rising Tides Car Wash, John's Crazy Socks, Biddy and Bows, Spectrum Designs, Popcorn for the People. There are plenty of organizations who are taking a model and applying it to a business. So no, it doesn't have to be a movie theater. And anybody that would want to do it, I say, don't. You're nuts. Don't ever do it. It's capitally exhaustive. It's one of the worst times ever to enter the movie theater industry. And really, sparkle mine yourself, because for Val, it was always movies. You saw K-Mann as Romeo. K-Mann, how many movies did you make with Val?
I'll say 3.
3 feature-length films that they put together. So Val already knew there was a love for movies. There's a common language. And Ridgefield didn't have a movie theater. So it was right for our community, but it may not be right for everybody else's.
Right,
if you have a 20-screen megaplex, guess what? It's not right for you.
Yeah.
And if you don't like movies, you're not going to be in there from 9 a.m. at night to 9 p.m. at night. You have to sparkle mine yourself too. And then, figure out what you love to do and place the model inside of that.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. I'll let K-Mann have the last word on this. There's a line in the film K-Mann where someone says there should be a prospector on every street in America, I think, or something like that. But as Munchie makes clear, maybe that's not quite right for everybody. But do you think the lessons that you learned, through these years and those that you share in the film, do you think those are important lessons for others to learn in creating and supporting businesses of any type?
That's a good question. I will say that I'm just a normal guy, like you, and love to work.
Yeah, that's it. What a great way to end.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much to all of our panelists. We really, really learned so much from each of you, from all your different experiences, and appreciate your time and your commitment to this project. And thank you all to our audience and to all of those who joined the Vinfen Film Festival today. Thank you.